Joining us in studio this morning from BuildersDoitCenter, Justin Ellis. Good morning.
Morning, Mike.
Officially on the show now.
Yes, as opposed to the pre-show commentary.
There you go. How's life treating you?
You know what? Pretty good. Spring is in full swing, and business is good. Life is good. I'm ready for it to either be warm or cold. The sweating in the afternoon and needing my vest in the morning is starting to wear me out a little bit.
But the overnight lows of 30, 40, and then highs
91.
of 80.
Yeah.
Well, I think I was looking like this weekend's overnight lows are like 50. So
yeah,
that's a little bit better.
I'm looking forward to that. Although we have been grilling at the house, so I'm going to call it spring.
Yeah, well,
if I can grill comfortably, it's spring.
I did that last weekend myself. I actually threw a couple steaks on the grill last Saturday. So
I got some salmon that's going to go on there this evening. I'm very much looking forward to. Did kebabs on Monday night, and they were fantastic.
Salmon, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah,
that sounds like a real good idea.
Yeah, I haven't decided whether I'm going to do cedar plank salmon yet or not. I've got some cedar planks at the house, so which actually ties in really well with what we're talking about today with fences and pergolas and all this, because cedar is a common product, and if you have leftover cedar pickets, sand them up a little bit, and they make perfectly good cedar planks. If you ever have done cedar plank salmon or cedar plank other products, pork is really good on a cedar plank on the grill.
There you go.
So good.
Maybe that's one of the segments we got to do. We always talk about home improvement. Maybe we need to put outdoor grilling with Justin Ellis here.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. We don't do a lot of grilling stuff out of the store, but it's a personal passion of mine, so we might just have to do it one day.
That'd be kind of fun. We might do something. But if you need to get your backyard ready for doing that stuff.
Exactly.
Today's the day to listen up because, we're talking about all those projects that because, a lot of people talk about planting and things like that. And, but like you said, not everybody, like in my situation, I don't have a yard to plant things in. But we got a spot where you can put a planter box or something like that. Mm-hmm. And, those are, you can go buy those things, but they can get kind of expensive. And you could probably build them for 1/10 of the price of what you win if you bought a fully assembled planter box or something.
Absolutely. Well, and there's a lot of opportunities for exterior home improvements that really give you a lot of bang for your buck. To me, they kind of fall into one of two categories. They're either front yard projects or backyard projects. Mm-hmm. Front yard projects are about curb appeal,
right?
Making your home more attractive from the street, which is really great if you're either just trying to improve your neighborhood, or if you're thinking about selling your home down the road. You can get a lot of bang for your buck. If they're backyard projects, this is things like pergolas, decks, planter beds in your backyard. They're for your enjoyment.
Sure.
And to me, that's really about extending your living space. We're really lucky in Southeast New Mexico that we really can use our outdoor living spaces 9 or 10 months out of the year.
Absolutely.
Most years. And because of that, to me, if you're not using part of your outdoor living space as part of your regular living space, as an extension of your kitchen or your living room or your dining room, you're really missing out on what amounts to free square footage on your home.
Absolutely.
You don't pay for it, really. You pay for your home, and so you can use that as a way to extend it. And outdoor projects are a really great one for a beginning do-it-yourself, or if you're trying to improve your carpentry skills and kind of learn a few things. Outdoor projects are a great one to start with because it doesn't have the direct impact on your lifestyle, like if you decide to tear out your kitchen and redo your kitchen as your first big project, because that's going to mess up your kitchen. If you decide to redo the fence and it takes you a little longer, it's the fence.
Yeah.
The dogs may be the only issue if you're like me.
Exactly.
But they're relatively easy to do, and it's a great way to add character to your home.
And it's also, like you mentioned curb appeal with the front yard stuff, but, if you're trying to sell your house and you walk to the backyard and you've got like a little gazebo area or a little fire pit, or the fences don't look like they're about to fall down, that, may not add direct dollars to the price tag, but as far as, that's all the stuff like, oh, that backyard was so beautiful. It's one of the pushovers. Say, that's it. I want this house because of that backyard,
Exactly, yes. And yet again, going back to that idea of free square footage, your home will seem bigger. If they walk out the back and there's a developed outdoor kitchen or just a nice area to put a grill, it feels like the home's bigger because, when a buyer walks through a home, what they're really envisioning isn't the home. They're envisioning their life in that home.
Sure.
And so if you have a backyard that they can envision themselves cooking steaks with their family or having friends over, they begin to fall in love with it.
Absolutely.
A lot more rapidly. And especially for those of us that live in Southeast New Mexico, we enjoy an outdoor lifestyle. I don't know about you, Mike, but I get a little cabin fever. About a month ago, I was starting to get to the point where I'm like, I don't really care what I'm going to do outside, but I just want to be outdoors and in the sun. Yeah. So, we enjoy that, and we should take advantage of that. So, as you're thinking about maybe taking on an outdoor project, they kind of break down into a couple areas. And we always talk about fences.
Sure.
And fencing's a great one if you have a wood picket fence or you want to put in a wood picket fence. You got some options. You can do cedar, you can do treated pickets, you can do a whitewood picket. My recommendation is always to go to cedar. We primarily sell cedar pickets, and the reason for that is that in terms of the life of that fence, the cedar's going to hold up a lot longer. Mm-hmm. Treated will not rot, but unfortunately, treated lumber is very green and it's not very stable, so it has a tendency to move.
So with our windy climate, that may not be the best.
And with our high heat and lots of sun. Yeah. So that's when you see, you go by somebody's picket fence and the pickets are moving every which direction except straight. That's oftentimes a treated fence. Cedar is still green, but it tends to be a lot more stable. And cedar's, it's a naturally rot-resistant product. It's beautiful. It's very traditional in southeast New Mexico. And there's lots of options with cedar. So you can go with a traditional dog-eared picket fence that you see all over southeast New Mexico. 5 or 6 foot tall. Traditional dog ear is very normal. But you know what? It doesn't take a lot of creativity to come up with something unique. Mm-hmm. You can do a stockade picket where you put a little gap if you want the ability to see through it. If you're not really going through a privacy fence, you just want something to divide the yard up between you and the neighbors and keep the dogs in. You can even get really creative and mix materials. I've seen a really neat, in fact, I'm seriously considering doing this at my own home, where somebody took 6 foot cedar pickets mm-hmm. and they do a 2 foot wide section of cedar pickets, and then they would take galvanized corrugated metal roofing. So traditional, like you see on barns, that's become a very hot look today with our kind of barn chic, that fixer-upper look. And they've used a 2 foot section of that and alternated those two going down the fence. And so you have this mix of the organic and the synthetic, and it's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's really good.
I'm seriously considering doing that at my house. It's a neat look, but you can get very creative and mix those products up.
Sure. And I know, like, if you're one of those folks, like, installing a fence yourself versus having it professionally installed, I just because I've priced them in the past, mm-hmm. I think having it professionally installed is very, very expensive. I didn't realize how it could get putting a fence in, having someone else do it, and I think it's a lot of it's labor, because you go and look at the price of fencing and you're like, that's not that expensive, but the actual installing it seems like it's 3 times that if you have someone doing it.
Yeah, that's about typical. I mean, good fencing material is not inexpensive. I mean, we have a 1x4 6 foot clip top picket that I think I'm selling for like $1.60 or $1.50. That's a top grade cedar picket. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the high end. But for every foot of fence, you're going to need 3 or 4 of those. So you're talking a $6 a foot worth of just pickets without your rails, without your posts, and without your concrete to cement your posts in with. So your materials can actually add up in a hurry, but the labor definitely adds up. Mm-hmm. Fencing, properly done, fencing takes time.
Sure.
It's not particularly complicated work, but it's about details. Anybody can slap pickets especially up.
But it's to be level. And
to make it look good takes patience.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the challenge is that most people who have the detail orientation to do good fence work can probably make more money doing something like interior trim work. And so they price fencing work much like they do trim work, because they're very similar, really. They're about the same pace. You can do about the same amount of work, but it also comes with having to dig holes and do some more manual labor than you would with something like that. And because of that, you end up spending some money. If you're not wanting to take on the project, I would highly recommend hiring a professional. You don't want just anybody throwing a fence up. You really want a true carpenter, somebody that's a craftsman, and understands how to make something look like it fits. Mm-hmm. Anybody can slap something up, but you want to make it look good, and you want to make it durable. You really want to think about, when you're selecting material for a wood fence, not only the wood, but also how it's built. What kind of material you're going to use for your posts.
Right.
Treated fence posts are kind of the base level to me, because if you use a non-treated fence post, you either need a treated fence post or a cedar fence post or redwood, a naturally rot-resistant wood. If you use an untreated fir or something like that, it's going to rot, period. That's all there is to it.
Right.
It's not a question of of if, it's a question of when. And so if you skimp on your fence posts, you're going to have issues down the road. Steel is also another great option. We do a lot of fence posts where we use a chain link type 2 3/8 terminal post, and there's a bracket specifically made for that called a PGT, a pipe grip tie from Simpson Strong Tie, that's galvanized and the whole system bolts together. That's a great way to go. I personally really like that because posts tend to be the first thing to go in a fence, even a properly built one, because they're in contract with the ground. Everything else isn't. And so steel holds up really well. It doesn't rot. It doesn't move. It doesn't go crooked. So that's really a key thing to remember. The other thing is remember to go tall enough with your fence posts. Anytime you're setting a post, you need a minimum of 18 inches in the ground here in southeast New Mexico. If you're in an area that gets colder, you have to go to below the frost line because they get what's called frost heave. Now, we're lucky that we really don't have frost heave here in New Mexico, but if you are in an area that is subject to frost heave, which some of northern New Mexico is, some of the mountain areas are, you have to go even deeper. But here you need at least 18 inches in the ground, and you may want to consider going deeper. If you're in an area where you have a lot of exposure to wind, and so this fence is going to act like a big sail, you may want to consider going 2 feet deep or something like that, because that's really what's going to take that load, and you don't want that fence moving over time.
No, yeah,
that can be a huge issue. Exactly. The other thing you want to think about is your rails. So on a fence, the rail is the piece that goes between the posts that your pickets are attached to. A lot of times you will see inexpensive fence panels or cheap fence builders use just 2 rails and use something like a 2x3. I'll be honest with you, I don't like that. It just doesn't work, especially on a 6-foot tall fence. You really need to go to a 3-rail system. So one towards the top, and higher is better because it's going to stabilize those pickets and keep them from trying to go crooked on you. One a few inches off the bottom, so 5 to 6 inches off the bottom of the fence, and then one in the middle, and that's really going to help those pickets last longer and stay straighter. And I would highly recommend going to a 2x4 rail, not a 2x3 rail. 2x3 is fine at first, but what happens over time with that narrower rail is it starts to sag. And so that's when you see these fence sections where you look at a section between 2 fence posts and it's kind of got a belly in it. That's what's happened, is those fence rails have sagged. And by having A, 3 rails, and B,
take some
wider rail, it distributes that load a lot better.
What about some of the other types of, like over the last couple of years, that white, I don't know if it's plastic or whatever it is, that seems to be kind of making a surge, or people starting to see that more and more in houses. I've seen commercials and they're talking about how they're like 100-mile winds withstand all this and all that. Are they pretty good products overall? Or
vinyl fencing is a great option. The big thing to keep in mind with vinyl is there's really a wide range of grades. There's some very cheap vinyl fences out there that I would not recommend for southeast New Mexico. They're perfectly fine in an area that doesn't get as much UV as we do. UV exposure beats plastic up, and so you need a very high-grade vinyl. And you need a vinyl system that is reinforced. So the vinyl needs to be covering something, especially on the posts and the rails.
Okay.
Vinyl pickets are probably fine by themselves, but vinyl is a good option. We're also starting to see some composite fencing. So the composite decking that has been around for a number of years, Trex, Moisture Shield, there's a number of brands out there. Some of those manufacturers are now making fencing products.
Okay.
If you like the look of a traditional picket fence and you want a zero maintenance system, I would recommend exploring those. They are quite expensive, to be honest with you, but you're going to put them up and you're done.
Sure.
Which I can definitely see the attraction to.
So as far as duration and life things, I mean, will they last longer than a wood fence?
They'll last 5 or 6 times longer than a wood fence. And the other factor is
so you pay more, but you're going to have it longer.
Exactly. And the other factor is color. So if you put a cedar fence up and don't do anything to it, it's going to naturally gray out to a real beautiful silver color. A lot of people like that. I personally love it. To me, it's a very classic look, that gray silver look. But if you want that red cedar warm color, you're going to have to continue to treat it with a product like Penafin or Duxback, one of the wood preservers, on an annual or biannual basis. And that's a lot of labor.
Sure.
Fences are easier to do because you just use a pump sprayer than compared to, say, a deck or siding. But they still take time. The difference with a composite is you're going to put it up and it's going to be brown and it's going to fade maybe 5 to 10%. So it'll go from being very dark brown to being a slightly less dark brown. And that's all it'll ever do. And other than maybe washing it once in a blue moon, if it gets something on it, you don't have any maintenance. And so that's kind of the difference. The service life of a cedar fence versus a composite fence is actually very similar. Both of them are going to last, 20, 30 years functionally, assuming no damage to them or that kind of thing. But the difference is that to maintain the original look, you're going to have no maintenance on a composite. You'll have a fairly high level of maintenance on a natural wood fence.
Gotcha.
So the other great option for Southeast New Mexico, if you want a zero maintenance fence, is masonry.
Which is very popular around here.
Absolutely, and it makes a fantastic fence. It's wind resistant.
I like them a lot. That's kind of my favorite, actually. I've seen some that they've stuccoed over and it looks really nice. Some they've left the cinder block look, and that looks nice too. It's as long as it's maintained well.
Exactly. Well, great. And with block, you have some options. A lot of people, when you say, oh, it's a block fence or a CMU, lots of times you'll hear your block referred to as CMU. That's concrete masonry unit. That's just the industry term for it. So block and CMU come in quite a few options. It's not just the gray flat product that we all see that's very common. Mm-hmm. There are also a number of other manufactured colors. We have access to 3 or 4 colors as kind of standard colors and probably another 30 that are available made to order. And those products are available not only with the standard, flat face. There's what's called a split face. A split face block is where they actually take and make the block. One side's a little thicker than it normally would be, and they actually have a machine that splits the face of that off, and so you end up with a rough, almost a rock look. And we will see lots of folks use those on fences. It's very common in commercial applications because it's just more attractive. And the other thing you can do is you can mix those products. There's quite a few fences around town where they have used a mix of split face and regular block in the same color, and it's a really neat look. You can also mix both masonry and your wood on a fence. So you can use masonry for block posts or columns, and then pickets or some other system in between. That's a really attractive look.
Sure. So now, when you do go with a masonry fence, does that? I'm always curious. Does that do you start that first round of bricks or whatever underground there, a foot or two, or?
Actually, what you traditionally do is you pour a footing. So the way you would do a block fence is dig down, that same 18 to 24 inches, put reinforcing steel rebar down into that footing, pour it with concrete to get a good flat level surface, and you actually extend that rebar up out of the concrete, and then block gets laid on top of that.
Gotcha.
So you don't ever want to put any masonry product in direct contact with the ground without having some way of leveling it.
So it's just like building a brick wall for your house or something like that.
It's exactly the same process. Really, the only difference between using block to build a structure and block to build a fence is that typically in a fence you're using a 6-inch wide block, not an 8-inch or wider block. But it's not hard to do. You can use what's called a pilaster to make your columns. So that it's a pre-designed system. There's even a product called Speed Block. So Speed Block has a tongue and groove system basically built into it, and so you only have to put mortar on the horizontal surfaces. You're not having to put mortar between every block. And laying blocks, kind of an art. If you have some experience laying block and you want to take on putting a fence up, it's not a bad way to go. But it's probably not a first project for somebody that thinks they're a mason or is an aspiring mason. The difference between masonry and basically every other trade is that with masonry, if you mess up, it's kind of hard to redo. You got some work. This is not like if I put pickets up wrong and I look at it and I go, oh God, this looks horrible. I pull the pickets off, I fix it, and I put it back. If I put 8 or 9 or 10 courses of block up and stand back and go, oh my Lord, what have I done?
You get sledgehammers and everything else.
A sledgehammer and a bobcat, and the product's probably not reusable. It's just a little more commitment.
Sure.
So I would highly recommend hiring a professional to put up a masonry fence unless you are A, experienced in it, or B, have quite a bit of confidence in your abilities as a do-it-yourselfer.
Are those relatively easy to repair? Like sometimes you'll just go by and you'll see like a brick's missing or something like that. Can you easily patch that, or because of the bonding and everything, it makes it a little trickier?
Actually, no, it's not tough to do. The biggest challenge in repairing masonry is getting colors to match.
Okay.
Because masonry is a manufactured product that uses cement and aggregates like sand that are locally sourced. Each plant is different. So block that comes out of two plants, even from the same company that has 2 plants in 2 different locations, will look different. Mm-hmm. And over time, they look different because they're using different sand deposits. The cement that comes from different plants looks a little bit different. And so you may go, oh, yeah, these are both gray, and then you put them up next to each other, and they're not quite the same gray.
Sure.
If that doesn't bother you, or if you're planning to paint it or do something like that, yeah, it's really easy to patch.
So it might be a good idea if you do build that fence and you got extra bricks, send them off the side in case one breaks. You have basically from the same batch there.
If that's a concern, absolutely.
Although, would it be a good idea to keep those outside?
Yeah.
Because that way they weather the same as the others and things?
Masonry doesn't weather much.
Okay.
It's,
I didn't know if it
pretty
fade
color
or anything.
stable.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's not too big of an issue. You'll have a little bit of that, but honestly, most of the fading in like a masonry product will happen in the first 60 to 90 days.
Gotcha.
And then it kind of stops. So
now, this question is not necessarily a construction question, but it's more of a, because we're talking about fences here. A lot of times you share a common fence with your neighbors. What's generally the rule of thumb on that one? If you're wanting to put a new fence up, obviously talking to the neighbors is probably a good idea. But if they're like not cooperating, do you just build another fence next to the one that's existing on your side? What's the
which you can absolutely do.
Yeah.
If it's on your side of the property line, you can absolutely do that. You always want to do a little research depending on the neighborhood you're in. You may have some restrictive covenants that dictate what fences can be built. In fact, that's a very common thing. Your restrictive covenants may require a masonry fence or require a picket fence. So you really want to look into that. And you want to talk to the city building inspector because you want to be careful not to do anything that's going to impact setbacks or anything like that.
And don't you need to get permits for fences?
You do.
So to keep yourself from getting in trouble, go visit city, get your permits and things like that.
Typically, that's on an existing fence. If you're replacing an existing fence, so let's say you have a current wood fence and it's dilapidated, you can replace that without a permit. Okay. Typically, but it's new fences that you want to. The other thing you really want to keep in mind is that anytime you're going to consider digging anywhere on your property, you want to call for locates. Yeah. And I believe the number is 811. You can call and they will send out the various utility companies. I think you have to give them a week. Yep, water lines, gas lines, fiber optics, underground electrical. They will mark all those things. That way you make sure you don't dig into any of those. It's not only a safety issue for you, but for instance, fiber optic cable is a really good example. If you damage a fiber optic cable, you're legally liable for the repair. Fiber optic cable is really expensive. You drive a shovel through a section of fiber optic cable, and it's like $100,000 to fix it. Woo. I'm just throwing that number out there, but it's not like, I got to go get a little pipe and patch this in. Yeah. It's seriously expensive.
Probably have to dig up from both ends to pull it out and replace.
Exactly. There have been companies in the construction business who have made errors and not called for locates and dug into fiber optics and had to go out of business. It cost them so much money.
So what's the rule of thumb on that? Say you do call it for your locates. And you start digging, and oops, you hit something like that, and
you're not liable then.
Gotcha.
If you call for locates and the utility company either A, fails to come out within whatever the prescribed period is, and I think it's a week, it may be less, or if they come out and they fail to locate their own infrastructure, you're not liable.
Gotcha.
Now, if you are digging and you impact something and you're concerned that either A, you might damage it and it doesn't need to be damaged, or if you're concerned for your safety, if you think it's a gas line or you don't want to cut into water, probably need to keep that in mind. The other thing that will happen is those locates don't find infrastructure on your property. So they may locate the city water line, but they're not going to locate your sprinkler line. So you want to be aware of what stuff is on your own property.
Sure.
Now, the good news is if you are digging a fence and you accidentally break your own sprinkler line, that's not too bad. You dig out a couple feet each way, you put a patch in, it happens.
And as long as you know where the sprinkler heads are, you could probably follow the trail pretty quick.
Pipe tends to go in a straight line, so yeah. Every once in a while that doesn't happen, but generally speaking, if you stand between if there's two sprinkler lines or sprinkler heads, draw a straight line between them and just assume there's a pipe in there.
Exactly.
Now, if you need to put a fence over that or you're locating a pergola or some other project on top of that, just when you're digging in that area, be careful. If you've rented some equipment and you're using a mini excavator or a post hole digger or something, that's somewhere you might want to use a shovel.
Sure.
Because that's really the difference. You can dig around anything with a shovel. If you're using a mini excavator, they're a little less dexterous, and you may do damage before you realize what you've done.
Well, obviously we're talking fences here. I mean, obviously if you're building a wood fence, things like that, you're not really digging trenches here. But when you're doing the masonry stuff,
well, even if you're digging post holes for a wood fence, you really need to still call for locates.
Oh yeah, obviously. But what's the because obviously if you're building, say, a masonry fence, you're going to be building a trench in essence right there. That's going to cover your whole process. So odds are you're going to cross some kind of line or something. It doesn't get in any other, unless it comes on through another part of the property. But I mean, is there a way around that if there is lines going across?
Well, it should be deep enough. Typically, water lines are buried at like 2 foot deep. Okay. So depth in all honesty, with any of these projects, you're probably not digging deep enough. You shouldn't be digging deep enough.
Right.
But that's why you still want to call for locates, just to be aware.
Just hope they didn't get lazy that one day and only dig yours only a foot down instead of 3 foot.
Exactly. Especially if you're in an older neighborhood. There's stuff that happened 25 and 30 and 50 and 100 years ago that might not meet current code, but it's still in place.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I mean, you talk, like I know Artesia just went through it, Rosl's going through it now, the infrastructure, these pipes they put in, 75 years ago, they lose their shelf life, and now, those iron or whatever it was made of is eroded away, and now they're replacing it. But still, you find out a lot of things how they did back then, and you're like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't always know, sewer lines are a great example. Sewer lines, I think the city standard in Roswell is like 6 feet. Well, I just had to have a new sewer put in connecting my home to the main line because the old one had some issues and partially collapsed. And so that was a little fun project. The plumber gets out into the alley and goes to start digging for the main to tie in, and I live in an older home, so it's a relatively old connection. The sewer there is not as old as the home is. The home predates that being part of the city. So, and he was expecting to find it at 5 or 6 feet, and he found it at like 8 feet and change.
Wow.
Yeah. They were like 3 inches from having to go get a different piece of equipment to dig this hole they had dug so deep.
So they were overzealous when they were digging yours.
Yeah, I don't know who buried that sucker, but they were ambitious. It is buried deep. So.
Oh, man. But yeah, if you got these things, definitely the big thing, call before you do any digging. That's the important thing. Just
absolutely.
lay those so you know exactly where they're at.
Even if you're considering planting a new tree or something in your yard. I mean, honestly, if you're digging more than about 6 inches deep, call for locates.
And anytime you put a tree in, I think it's what is it? What's the rule of thumb for you want to dig a 3 foot hole for a 1 foot tree kind of deal?
You want to whatever the root ball is on the item you're planting, you want to go about 3 times that size.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of that's not so much about getting that in there. It's about wanting to create plenty of room for those roots to grow and wanting soil that you've disturbed, aerated, and moved. And that's both in width and primarily in depth. That's a problem people run into lots of times is, they'll be putting in a tree with a 2 foot root ball and they'll dig a 2 foot, 3 inch deep hole. Well, you really want to dig like a 3 or a 4 foot deep hole and then put some soil back into it that's a little looser before you put that tree in place.
It allows the roots to spread and thrive.
Absolutely. And you also want to make sure that you really prep that root ball for burial.
And also, it's probably a good idea. That way you know where the pipes are, too, because how many times have you seen that? Like, you get water pipes coming in, and it's tree roots. Now, if you just put a tree within a foot or two of that line, guess what you're going to be dealing with in a while?
Yeah, in 50 years, it will be a problem.
So think about stuff like that. So
absolutely.
And then, of course, your planter boxes, things like that. I mean, it's like probably very similar to what you learned in like 8th grade shop class, is building these planter boxes, things like that, just using the right woods and the things like that.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to things like planter beds, you have some alternatives. You can use, a 2x or 3x lumber material to build a planter box. You could also use things like railroad ties. A lot of folks like raised beds made out of used railroad ties, secured together with rebar spikes, or we have a long screw, an RSS screw that's intended for an application like that. And those are a neat option. You can also use masonry in that application as well.
Absolutely.
So, but you want to keep in mind, use something that's rot resistant. And when you're building it, keep in mind controlling the soil that gets out of it, so lining that with a landscape fabric or a plastic, which will also help with weed control.
Sure.
But make sure that whatever you do, you allow for drainage. You don't want a bed to hold water. It's not a pond.
Right.
It needs to drain really sufficiently. Yeah, exactly. So really, anytime you do that first layer should be something like gravel or another aggregate that allows water to get out of there very efficiently.
Sure.
So
if you think about doing that, obviously come down to builders. You want to say, hey, I'm sure if you talk to them and you're like, hey, what's some good plans or ways to go about it? I'm sure there'll be folks that could tell you as far as the layering, things like that. You can even do your probably dig online if you're looking like for specific blueprints on a planter box.
Absolutely.
And then bring that in and say, this is what I want to do. What do we need to do this?
Absolutely. There's a great resource that's offered by the North American Retail Hardware Association, which is one of our trade industry associations, called planitdiy.com. So, planitdiy.com. And there's quite a few videos on there, plans on there for different projects. So not only stuff we're talking about, but even basic repairs. If you're just thinking about wanting to learn more about working on your own home and home improvement, Planet DIY is a pretty good resource, actually.
Very good. So check that out. That'd be kind of, so if you're thinking about projects, maybe, Pinterest and all that's out there and everyone's looking at these things. Check out that website. Maybe that'll inspire you for something like, I need something out here. I just don't know what. Maybe go through there and use that, and that'll maybe kind of knock the brain into some ideas or something.
Absolutely.
Like that. So, and then when you get it, print it off or put it on your tablets or phones.
Yep.
Bring it down to Builders, Do It Center there, and be like, all right, this one I want to do. What do I need to build? And the guys will go through and say, you need this, this, and this, and
absolutely
talk what tools you need, everything else.
Absolutely.
Too. Good deal. Justin, is there anything else we want to talk about in this, but we got sidetracked or didn't get a chance to talk about?
Nothing major that I can think of. Okay. I have been instructed to give a little bit of a shout out. My wife's class out at Brendo Mid is, I believe, listening in this morning. So I'm probably in trouble because now I'm going to have to build one of those fences I've discussed. I feel that coming on. But
yeah, you did say you were thinking about doing it. Your wife's going to be like, yeah, you should do that tomorrow.
We've been talking about it for 2 years that she's lived in that house with me. So yeah, I probably ought to get on that at some point. Unfortunately, I'm bad at procrastinating, as she can attest to. It's kind of the cobbler's kid situation.
Sure.
I come on here and talk to you about all these projects. I sit at the store and we work on people's projects with.
That's right. You go home, you don't feel like doing that.
Hey, I just don't do them. I don't know, not feeling like it's it. I'd love to tell you I get them all done, but I don't.
Sure. Well, it's a motivation thing. It's like, man, there's a comfy chair here, or you get home, and that's a lot more, appealing than let's go out and work on the fence.
Yes.
And other thing probably want to mention here. Look real soon, like when we talk about some of these subjects here on the morning shows and things like that. When you stop by the Builders, we're almost there. Yeah. Got a little. You can come by, and there'll be like an end cap with some of the products and some of the tools and things we talk about at these various segments. So be on the lookout for that here.
Absolutely. And when you walk into the store, there'll be a sticker on the floor, so you can actually follow those stickers. They'll direct you to our I don't know if we've decided what we were calling it, but we're going to call it the Mike Winters end cap. We were discussing putting a big picture of you on it.
Some people get rest stops. I get an end cap.
Yeah, exactly. So
very awesome. Yeah. It's way better than a toilet.
Yeah, true story. So yeah, I guess it's always better than your picture in a urinal cake.
That's right.
So keep an eye out for that, and that way, if you're thinking about these projects and not sure what products you need, you can come into the store, find that, and we're going to feature items related to whatever project we talked about in the previous show, and then we'll switch them out a day or so before.
That sounds good. Excellent. So be looking for that here in the coming weeks.
And, yep, probably next week we'll get that up.
All right, and then we'll do a full talk about it next here in about 2 weeks. When we
2 weeks from now.
Here.
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. Well, Justin,
fantastic.
As always, have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Okay.
You too, Mike.
All right.